The silence of space was broken by a weak signal that reached the human ship UE as Harbinger. Captain Jake Morrison sat in his command chair, watching the stars through the main screen. His crew had been exploring this part of the galaxy for 6 months, looking for new worlds and new life. Lisa Carter, the communications officer, looked up from her station with wide eyes. "Captain, I'm picking up something strange," she said, her voice filled with excitement and worry. "What kind of strange?" Morrison asked, turning his chair toward her. "It's a distress signal, sir, but it's not from any human ship." Lisa's fingers moved quickly over her controls. "The computer is trying to translate it now." Morrison stood up and walked over to Lisa's station. The other crew members on the bridge stopped their work and listened. It was rare to find signs of intelligent alien life, and this was the first time they had heard one asking for help. The ship's computer made several beeping sounds. Then a mechanical voice filled the bridge. Translation complete. Playing message. Now, a new voice came through the speakers. It sounded desperate and afraid, though the words were spoken in perfect English, thanks to the computer's translation. "This is Prime Minister Kethvar of the Zelani Federation. We send this message to anyone who can hear us. Our worlds are dying. The Devourers have come to our space. They have already destroyed 12 of our planets. They eat everything in there. Path, our people, our cities, our very worlds become part of their terrible hunger." The bridge crew looked at each other with shocked faces. Lisa turned up the volume as the message continued. "We have heard stories from traders and travelers. Stories of warriors from a world called Sol 3 Earth. They say humans are fighters like no other species in the galaxy. Most people think these stories are just myths, but we have no choice left. We must believe." Morrison felt a chill run down his spine. The alien was talking about humans, about Earth. "If any humans can hear this message, please help us. We are not warriors. We are builders, artists, and teachers. We know how to grow crystals that sing and how to make light dance in the air. But we do not know how to fight monsters. The Devourers will reach our homeworld of Crystalla Prime in 30 days. After that, there will be no more Zelani in the universe." The message ended, leaving the bridge in complete silence. Morrison looked around at his crew. They all had the same expression of shock and determination. "Where did the signal come from?" Morrison asked. Lisa checked her instruments. "The Kepler 442 system, sir. It's about 47 light years from here." "And these Devourers?" Morrison asked the ship's science officer, Dr. Helen Torres. Dr. Torres shook her head. "I've never heard of them, Captain. But if they can destroy entire planets, they must be incredibly dangerous." Morrison walked back to his chair and sat down. He had to make a decision that could change everything. "Lisa, send a message to Earth Command. Tell them we've received an alien distress call and need immediate orders." "Yes, sir," Lisa replied, already working on the message. Within 6 hours, a reply came back from Earth. Admiral Patricia Hayes herself appeared on the main screen, her face serious but determined. "Captain Morrison, your message has been received and reviewed by the highest levels of Earth Command. The President and the Security Council have made their decision. We will help these Zelani people." Morrison felt pride swell in his chest. This was why he had joined the space fleet, to represent the best of humanity among the stars. "The fleet is already being prepared," Admiral Hayes continued. "Admiral Ryan Cross will command the operation from the dreadnought UE Leviathan. You and the Harbinger will join the fleet as scouts. This will be humanity's first major space war, Captain. Make us proud." The screen went dark, and Morrison turned to his crew. "You heard the Admiral. We're going to war." Over the next few days, the Harbinger received constant updates from Earth, the greatest war fleet in human history. was being assembled. Ships that had never been tested in real combat were being loaded with weapons and supplies. Soldiers who had only fought in training exercises were being prepared for real battle. Dr. Torres spent her time studying the little information they had about the Zilani and the Devourers. What she found made her worried. "Captain," she said, entering Morrison's office, "I've been looking at the data from the Zilani message. These Devourers aren't just conquerors. They're something much worse." Morrison looked up from his reports. "What do you mean?" "They consume entire civilizations, but not just by killing them. They somehow absorb them, make them part of their collective. Every species they defeat makes them stronger and smarter." Morrison felt his blood run cold. How many species have they consumed? Based on the Zilani's message, at least 12 that we know of. But Captain, that's just in Zilani space. We don't know how many others they've taken in different parts of the galaxy. Morrison stood up and walked to the window of his office, looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there, an entire species was about to be wiped out unless humans could. "Stop it. Doctor, in your professional opinion, do we have a chance against these Devourers?" Dr. Torres was quiet for a long moment. "Captain, I've studied human history. I know what our species is capable of when we're protecting something we care about. These Devourers may have consumed 12 civilizations, but they've never faced humans before." Morrison smiled grimly. "Then they're in for a surprise." The next morning, the Harbinger received orders to join the fleet at the rally point near Jupiter. As the ship prepared to leave, Morrison looked one last time at the message from the Zilani. A species of artists and builders was calling for help, and humanity was answering. He didn't know it yet, but this moment would change both species forever. The galaxy was about to learn why humans were whispered about in the dark corners of space stations, and why smart species avoided the Sol system. The Devourers had awakened humanity's protective instincts. Now they would face the consequences. UES Harbinger jumped to hyperspace, beginning humanity's journey toward its first interstellar war. The space around Jupiter looked like a metal city floating in the darkness. Dozens of human warships hung in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming under the distant light of the sun. The UES Harbinger arrived at the rally point and took its position among the greatest fleet humanity had ever assembled. Captain Jake Morrison stood on his bridge, watching the massive ships around him. The flagship UES Leviathan dominated the center of the formation, its weapon systems powerful enough to crack a moon. Around it, smaller ships moved like guards protecting their king. "Captain," Lisa Carter called from her station, "Admiral Cross is requesting all ship commanders report to the Leviathan for briefing." Morrison nodded. "Take us in, Lisa." The shuttle bay of the Leviathan was large enough to hold Morrison's entire ship. As he walked through the corridors, he saw crew members preparing for war. Some cleaned weapons, others checked equipment, and a few just sat quietly, thinking about what was coming. The briefing room was filled with ship commanders from across the fleet. Morrison recognized some faces from the Academy, others from previous missions. At the front of the room stood Admiral Ryan Cross, a tall man with gray hair and scars on his face from the Mars uprising years ago. "Ladies and gentlemen," Cross began, his voice carrying clearly through the room. "Today we make history. This is humanity's first major engagement with a hostile alien species." The room fell silent as Cross activated a holographic display showing the Kepler 442 system. "Our enemy calls themselves the Devourers. They have destroyed 12 Zilani worlds and are moving toward their home planet of Crystalla Prime. We have 19 days to get there and stop them." Captain Alex Martinez, commander of the stealth destroyer UES Phantom, raised his hand. "Sir, what do we know about their capabilities?" Cross nodded to Dr. Helen Torres, who had been transferred to the fleet as their alien expert. She stood and activated new images on the display. The Devourers appear to be a collective consciousness, Torres explained. They don't just conquer civilizations, they absorb them. Every species they defeat becomes part of their hive mind, making them stronger and more intelligent. Captain Nicole Johnson from the heavy cruiser U.E.'s Thunderstrike frowned. How do we fight something like that? The same way humans have always fought, came a rough voice from the back of the room. Everyone turned to see Captain Danny Collins. Entering the briefing room, Collins was known throughout the fleet as Reaper, a former criminal who had been given a choice between life in prison or commanding the experimental weapons platform. Use RAGNAROK. Nodded toward Collins. Captain Collins will be leading our heavy assault group. His ship carries experimental weapons that have never been tested in combat. Collins grinned, showing teeth that had been replaced with metal after a bar fight on Europa. If these Devourers want to eat civilizations, they can try eating plasma heated to 1,000,000 degrees. The briefing continued for 2 hours. Each captain received their orders and learned about their role in the coming battle. The plan was complex, but simple. Get to Crystalla Prime, protect the Zilani, and destroy the Devourers before they could. Absorb another species. After the meeting, Morrison found himself in the Leviathan's dining hall with several other captains. The conversation was tense as they discussed what they might face. I've been thinking about what the Zilani said, Captain. Johnson said, picking at her food. They called us mythical warriors. What if we're not what they expect? Captain Martinez nodded. They'd probably think we're some kind of super soldiers or ancient gods. When they see we're just regular humans, they might lose hope. Regular humans? Collins laughed. Lady, humans are the only species crazy enough to strap explosives to their bodies and run at enemies. We're the only ones who invented the concept of a suicide mission. If that's not mythical, I don't know what is. Morrison thought about Collins' words as he returned to his ship. The Harbinger was now traveling with the fleet toward Kepler 442, and he had time to observe his crew. Sergeant Linda Brooks was in the cargo bay, training with her elite Terran shock troops. These soldiers had been selected from the best fighters. In the human military, they practiced combat moves that would work in zero gravity, on different planets, and against enemies they had never seen before. Remember, Brooks told her troops, we don't know what these Devourers look like or how they fight. Stay flexible, stay alive, and protect each other. One of her soldiers, a young man named Tony Garcia, raised his hand. Sergeant, what if they're too strong for us? Brooks smiled. Garcia, your great-grandfather fought in World War III. His great-grandfather fought in World War II. Every generation of humans has faced enemies that seemed too strong. We're still here. They're not. In another part of this ship, Commander, Kevin Roberts was checking his mech unit. The Iron Wolves were experimental fighting machines that allowed a single pilot to control. A 12-foot-tall robot armed with enough weapons to destroy a small building. How are they looking, Commander? Morrison asked as he entered the mech bay. Roberts looked up from his machine's control panel. These mechs were designed to fight on planets with different gravity and atmosphere. I just hope they work in space. Combat too. They'll work, Dr. Sam Mitchell said as he joined them. Mitchell was the fleet's lead combat medic, but he had seen enough battles to know how human weapons performed. Commander, humans have been building better ways to fight for thousands of years. These mechs are just the latest step. As the fleet traveled through hyperspace, Morrison received regular updates from Earth. The entire planet was following the mission. News reporters talked about humanity's first interstellar war, while scientists studied every piece of data about the Devourers. The president of Earth appeared on screens across the fleet, speaking to the crews. You carry with you the hopes of all humanity. You represent our species among the stars. The galaxy is watching to see what humans are made of. But Morrison knew the truth. The galaxy wasn't just watching, it was waiting. Other alien species had heard about the Devourers and were afraid. If humans failed, the Devourers would continue consuming civilizations until nothing was left. 10 days into the journey, the fleet received new intelligence from Zilani scouts. The data was transmitted to every ship, and Morrison gathered his senior staff to review it. The Devourers have reached the outer planets of the Zilani system, Dr. Torres reported. They're not just attacking, they're building. The holographic display showed images that made Morrison's stomach turn. The Devourers were constructing massive bioships from the bodies of conquered aliens. Ships that were alive, that could heal damage and adapt to new weapons. How big are these bioships? Morrison asked. The largest one is 12 kilometers long, Torres replied. It's made from the combined remains of an entire planet's population. Silence filled the room. Morrison looked around at his crew and saw the same expression on every face, determination mixed with horror. Sir, Sergeant Brooks said, request. Permission to increase training schedule. My troops need to be ready for anything. Granted, Morrison replied. All departments, prepare for combat. We're going to face something that no human has ever fought before. As the fleet continued toward Kepler 442, Morrison stood in his office looking at the star maps. Somewhere ahead of them, an alien species was fighting for survival. Soon, humans would join that fight. The galaxy was about to learn why humans were called monsters. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler 442 system and immediately saw hell itself. Crystalla Prime hung in space like a beautiful blue jewel, but it was surrounded by nightmare ships that looked like they had been grown rather than built. The Devourer bioships were massive dark things that pulsed with sickly light. My God, whispered Lisa Carter from her station on the UES Harbinger. They're huge. Captain Jake Morrison studied the tactical display. The largest Devourer ship was 15 kilometers long and looked like it had been made from twisted metal and organic matter. Smaller ships, each the size of a human cruiser, moved around it like hungry sharks. Captain, Dr. Helen Torres called from the science station. I'm reading massive energy signatures from those ships. They're not just vessels. They're alive. Admiral Ryan Cross's voice came through the communication system to all ships in the fleet. This is Admiral Cross. We have visual contact with the enemy. All ships maintain formation and prepare for first contact with the Zilani. A new signal appeared on the screens. A small, elegant ship approaching from Crystalla Prime. It was beautiful, made from what looked like living crystal that caught and reflected light in amazing patterns. Incoming transmission, Lisa reported. It's from the Zilani ship. The main screen flickered, then showed the bridge of the alien vessel. The crew of the Harbinger got their first look at the Zilani people. They were tall, thin beings that seemed to be made of living crystal. Their bodies caught light and threw it back in rainbow patterns. They moved with grace and seemed to glow with their own inner light. I am Prime Minister Kethvar of the Zilani Federation, the alien leader said. His voice was musical, like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. We cannot express our joy at your arrival. The legendary warriors of Sol 3 have come to help us. Morrison felt uncomfortable. The Zilani leader was looking at him and his crew like they were gods or heroes from ancient stories. The truth was, they were just people trying to do the right thing. Prime Minister, Morrison replied, we received your distress call. We're here to help however we can. Kethvar's crystal body seemed to shine brighter. We have heard stories of human warriors who fear nothing and fight like demons. Stories of a species that treats war like art and never surrenders. We prayed these stories were true. Morrison exchanged glances with his crew. The Zilani had built humans up in their minds as some kind of super warriors. What would they think when they learned the truth? "Sir," Lisa reported, "Admiral Cross is requesting all ship commanders and the Zilani leader meet aboard the Leviathan." An hour later, Morrison found himself in the Leviathan's main conference room with the other human commanders and Prime Minister Kethvar. The Zilani leader was even more impressive in person. His crystal body was almost 7 feet tall and seemed to contain tiny stars that twinkled in the light. "Prime Minister," Admiral Cross began, "we need to understand what we're fighting. Tell us about the Devourers." Kethvar's body dimmed slightly, like a light being turned down. "They came from beyond our space 2 years ago. At first, we thought they were just another species looking for new worlds. But they don't want to live on our planets. They want to eat them." Dr. Torres leaned forward. "Eat them how?" "They consume everything," Kethvar replied. "People, animals, plants, even the rocks and soil. But worse than that, they absorb the minds of everyone they consume. Every person they eat becomes part of their collective consciousness." Captain Collins grinned his metal-toothed smile. "So, they get stronger with every world they take?" "Yes," Kethvar said. "They have the knowledge and memories of 12 civilizations now. They know how we fight, how we think, how we defend ourselves. That is why we called for humans." Admiral Cross frowned. "Prime Minister, you seem to have very high expectations of us. We're just soldiers and sailors doing our job." Kethvar's crystal body flashed with bright light. "Just soldiers? The stories say humans are the only species that fights wars for fun, that you have competitions to see who can kill the most enemies, that you create weapons too dangerous for your own species to use, then use them anyway." Morrison felt a chill as he realized the Zilani's view of humanity was both wrong and terrifyingly right. Humans didn't fight for fun, but they had spent thousands of years getting very good at war. "Sir," Captain Martinez interrupted, "we're getting reports of Devourer movement. They've detected our fleet." The conference room screens came alive with tactical displays. The Devourer bioships were moving away from Crystalla Prime and heading toward the human fleet. Even from a distance, Morrison could see the ships were unlike anything humans had ever built. They moved like living things, and their hulls seemed to shift and change as they traveled. "All commanders, return to your ships," Admiral Cross ordered. "We're about to find out what these Devourers can do." As Morrison's shuttle returned to the Harbinger, he could see the enemy ships getting closer. The largest bioship was in the center, surrounded by smaller vessels that seemed to swim through space rather than fly. "Captain," Sergeant Brooks reported, "from the cargo bay, my troops are ready for boarding actions if needed." "Acknowledged," Morrison replied. "All hands, prepare for combat. This is what we came here to do." The first shots were fired by Captain Martinez's stealth destroyer, the U.E.'s Phantom. The ship appeared behind the Devourer formation, like a ghost, and launched a spread of quantum torpedoes. The weapons hit a medium-sized bioship and tore through its hull, causing green blood to spray into space. But instead of exploding, the damaged ship began to heal. The holes in its hull closed like wounds, and it turned toward the Phantom with what looked like anger. "Impossible," Dr. Torres whispered. "It's regenerating." The Devourer ship fired back with weapons that seemed to be made of living energy. Beams of sickly green light reached out toward the Phantom, but Captain Martinez was ready. His ship vanished into stealth mode and reappeared somewhere else, firing again. "All ships," Admiral Cross commanded, "engage the enemy. Show them what humans can do." The battle began in earnest. The human fleet moved with precision and speed, using tactics the Devourers had never seen. Instead of charging straight at the enemy like other species, the humans spread out and attacked from multiple directions. Captain Johnson's heavy cruiser used Thunderstrike, unleashed a barrage of missiles that split apart just before impact, turning one missile into dozens of smaller warheads. The Devourer ships tried to adapt, but they couldn't predict which targets were real and which were decoys. Captain Collins, experimental weapons platform Use Ragnarok, fired something that made space itself seem to burn. The beam weapon turned solar radiation into focused energy that could melt through any armor. When it hit the largest bioship, the alien vessel screamed, actually screamed, in pain and rage. They're not just ships, Morrison realized. They're alive. They can feel pain. The Devourers responded by doing something that chilled the blood of every human who saw it. The bioships began to change shape, growing new weapons and armor as they fought. They were adapting in real time, learning from each human attack. "Sir," Lisa reported, "the enemy is changing tactics. They're starting to predict our movements." Morrison watched the tactical display and saw that Lisa was right. The Devourers were beginning to counter human strategies. They had absorbed the knowledge of 12 civilizations. They were learning fast. All ships, Admiral Cross commanded, implement Protocol 7. Morrison smiled grimly. Protocol 7 was something only humans would think of. It was the order to stop following any plan and start improvising. Other species fought with rigid tactics, but humans were chaos incarnate when they wanted to be. The human fleet suddenly scattered in all directions, each ship doing something completely unpredictable. The Devourers tried to adapt, but they couldn't predict random human creativity. Captain Martinez began using his own ship as a weapon, ramming into Devourer vessels, and then jumping away before they could respond. Captain Johnson turned her ship's engines into weapons, using the fusion exhaust to burn through enemy hulls. Captain Collins started playing human music over all frequencies, confusing the Devourer hive mind with the sounds of rock and roll. Tide of battle was turning, but Morrison knew this was just the beginning. The real fight would come when humans had to board the Devourer ships and face the enemy face to face. "Sergeant Brooks," Morrison called, "prepare your teams. We're going hunting." The battle around Crystalla Prime had been raging for 6 hours when the Devourers brought in their reinforcements. More bioships dropped out of hyperspace, arriving from the 12 worlds they had already consumed. Each ship was different, built from the bodies and technology of different alien species. Captain Dr. Helen Torres called from her station on the UES Harbinger. "I'm reading massive energy signatures from the new arrivals. These ships are larger and more advanced than the first wave." Captain Jake Morrison studied the tactical display. The new Devourer ships were enormous. Some were 20 kilometers long and bristled with weapons that seemed to be made from living tissue. The largest ship at the center of the formation was something from nightmares. "My God," Lisa Carter whispered. "That big one is made from an entire planet." Morrison could see what she meant. The massive bioship looked like it had been constructed from the bones and cities of a conquered world. Buildings and vehicles were fused into its hull, and he could see the faces of absorbed beings staring out from the organic metal. Admiral Ryan Cross's voice came through the communication system, tense but determined. "All ships were facing a full Devourer fleet. They're bringing everything they have to this fight." The enemy formation moved toward the human fleet with terrifying purpose. The Devourers had learned from the first battle and were now adapting their tactics to counter human unpredictability. "Sir," Sergeant Linda Brooks called from the cargo bay, "my boarding teams are ready. Just get us close enough to those ships." Morrison nodded. The plan was dangerous, but necessary. While the fleet kept the Devourers busy, small teams of humans would board the bioships and attack them from the inside. It was the kind of insane tactic that only humans would attempt. "Captain Martinez," Admiral Cross ordered, "take your stealth destroyer and deliver the boarding teams. The rest of us will keep them distracted." The U's Phantom vanished from sensors as Captain Alex Martinez engaged the ship's advanced stealth systems. Meanwhile, the other human ships began the most violent display of warfare the galaxy had ever seen. Captain Danny Collins aboard the U's Ragnarok unleashed his experimental solar weapon at full power. The beam didn't just destroy the enemy ship it hit. It turned the bioship into a miniature star that burned for 30 seconds before collapsing into plasma. "Did you see that?" Collins laughed over the communication channel. "That's what happens when you mess with humans." But the Devourers weren't intimidated. A massive planet ship at the center of their formation began to glow with malevolent energy. When it fired, the weapon that emerged was unlike anything humans had ever seen. It was a beam of pure destruction that could crack planets in half. All ships' evasive maneuvers. Admiral Cross shouted. The human fleet scattered like leaves in a hurricane, but the planet cracker beam followed them. It struck the heavy cruiser U's Thunderstrike, commanded by Captain Nicole Johnson. For a moment, Morrison thought the ship was completely destroyed. Then Johnson's voice came through the communication system, angry and defiant. "This is Thunderstrike. We're hurt, but not dead. Returning fire with everything we have." The damaged cruiser launched every missile it carried in a single massive barrage. The missiles spread out like a swarm of metal insects, each one programmed to target a different part of the enemy formation. Meanwhile, the UE's Phantom had reached the Devourer bioships. In the cargo bay, Sergeant Brooks and her Terran shock. Troops prepared for the most dangerous mission of their lives. "Listen up," Brooks told her soldiers. "We're going into ships that are alive. They can think, they can feel pain, and they can fight back. Stay together, watch each other's backs, and remember, we're not just fighting for humanity today. We're fighting for every species these monsters have consumed." The boarding pods launched from the Phantom and streaked toward the bioships like bullets. Each pod contained 5 human soldiers armed with weapons designed to fight in close quarters. They had trained for this moment, but nothing could have prepared them for what they found inside the enemy ships. Brooks' pod punched through the hull of a medium-sized bioship, and immediately she knew they were in trouble. The corridors weren't. Made of metal, they were made of bone and flesh. The walls pulsed like a heartbeat, and the air smelled of death and decay. "This is Alpha Team," Brooks reported through her radio. "We're inside the enemy ship. It's definitely alive in here." The corridors were narrow and twisted, designed for the original species that had been absorbed by the Devourers. Brooks and her team moved carefully, their weapon lights cutting through the darkness. Strange sounds echoed around them, whispers, moans, and something that might have been crying. Sergeant, one of her soldiers, Tony Garcia, called softly. "Look at the walls." Brooks turned her light toward the wall and nearly dropped her weapon. Faces were staring back at her, the faces of the aliens who had been consumed by the Devourers. They were still alive, somehow, trapped in the living ship and forced to be part of the collective consciousness. "Keep moving," Brooks ordered, though. Her voice was shaking. "We have a job to do." The team made their way deeper into the ship, looking for the central control area. According to Dr. Torre's analysis, each bioship had a central nerve cluster that controlled the entire vessel. If they could destroy it, the ship would die. They found the control center after 20 minutes of careful movement. It was a chamber filled with pulsing organic computers and screens that seemed to be made of living tissue. In the center of the room was something that made Brooks' blood run cold. It was a being that had once been the captain of this ship's original crew. Now it was fused into the control systems, its body twisted and changed by the Devourer's absorption process. When it saw the humans, it spoke in a voice that sounded like a dozen different aliens talking at once. "You cannot stop us," it said. "We are eternal. We are hunger. We will consume your species as we have consumed all others." "Not today," Brooks replied, raising her weapon. The fight that followed was unlike anything in human military history. The control creature could manipulate the ship itself, making the walls move and the floor shift. But Brooks and her team had trained for impossible situations. They moved like dancers, covering each other and striking at the creature from multiple angles. Garcia threw a grenade that exploded in a burst of white phosphorus, burning away part of the creature's organic components. Another soldier, Mary Collins, used her plasma rifle to sever the connections between the creature and the ship's systems. "It's working," Brooks shouted. "The ship is losing control." Outside, the bioship began to shake and lose power. Captain Martinez watched from the Phantom as the enemy vessel started to drift helplessly through space. "Brooks, you did it," Martinez called through the radio. "Get out of there before the ship dies completely." But Brooks and her team weren't finished. They planted explosive charges throughout the control center, enough to make sure the bioship would never recover. As they ran back toward their boarding pod, the ship began to collapse around them. The explosion lit up space like a new star. The bioship died in agony, its death scream echoing through the Devourer fleet's communication network. For the first time in their existence, the Devourers felt something they had never experienced before: fear. "This is Admiral Cross," came the voice over the communication system. "Well done, Sergeant Brooks. All boarding teams, continue your missions. We're going to tear these monsters apart from the inside." The battle continued to rage around Crystalla Prime. Human ships darted in and out of the Devourer formation, each one fighting with a creativity and viciousness that the enemy couldn't match. The Devourers had absorbed 12 civilizations, but they had never faced a species that treated warfare as both science and art. Commander Kevin Roberts launched his Iron Wolf mech units from the cargo bay of the UES Harbinger. The 12-foot-tall combat robots moved through space like armored angels, their weapon systems devastating the smaller Devourer ships. "This is Iron Wolf Leader," Roberts called as his mech tore through a bioship's hull. "These things bleed real good when you know where to cut them." But the Devourers weren't giving up. The massive planet ship at the center of their formation began to change, growing new weapons and armor as it prepared for its final attack. The weapon it was building was larger than anything it had used before, a planet killer that could destroy entire star systems. "Sir," Dr. Torres called from her station, "that weapon is charging up. If it fires, it won't just destroy our fleet. It will destroy Crystalla Prime and everything else in this system." Morrison looked at the tactical display and made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. "All ships, this is Captain Morrison. I'm taking the Harbinger on a direct attack run at that weapon. Cover me." "Jake, no." "Admiral Cross's voice crackled through the communication system. "Your ship isn't big enough to make a difference." "Maybe not," Morrison replied, "but I'm not going alone." Captain Collins' voice came through the channel, filled with his usual dark humor. "Count me in, Morrison. I've always wanted to see how hot a fusion core can burn." The U's Ragnarok and the UES Harbinger turned toward the massive planet ship, their engines burning at maximum power. They were flying directly toward certain death, but they were doing it to save an entire star system. The galaxy was about to learn. The most imposed final battle for Crystalla Prime was about to begin. The massive Devourer planet ship hung in space like a metal moon, its planet-killer weapon almost ready to fire. Captain Jake Morrison and Captain Danny Collins were flying their ships straight toward certain death. But they weren't alone. All ships, Admiral Ryan Cross called through the communication system. Form up on the Harbinger and Ragnarok. We're going in together. One by one, the human fleet joined the suicide run. The U.E.'s Leviathan, damaged but still fighting, took point. The stealth destroyer U.E.'s Phantom appeared beside them, and Captain Nicole Johnson's wounded cruiser U.E.'s Thunderstrike limped into formation. Even the Zilani ships joined the attack, their crystal hulls singing with harmonious battle songs. "This is Prime Minister Kethvar," came the alien leader's musical voice. "We have watched humans fight for our world. Now we will die beside you if needed. Today, Zilani and humans are brothers." Morrison felt tears in his eyes as he watched the mixed fleet racing toward the planet ship. The Devourers had expected to face warriors, but they were facing something much more dangerous. People who cared about each other. The planet killer weapon began to glow with terrible energy. Dr. Helen Torres, still at her station, despite the chaos, calculated they had less than 3 minutes before it fired. "All ships," Admiral Cross ordered, "concentrate fire on the weapon itself. If we can't destroy the ship, maybe we can stop that gun." The human fleet opened fire with everything they had. Missiles, energy beams, and exotic weapons struck the planet killer, but the massive weapon was protected by layers of living armor that healed faster than they could damage it. "It's not working," Captain Johnson reported. "The weapon is too well defended." That was when Sergeant Linda Brooks made her decision. She was still aboard one of the bioships with her boarding team, having fought their way through deck after deck of twisted corridors. Now she saw something that might save everyone. "Captain Morrison," she called through her radio, "I'm seeing something here. This bioship is connected to the planet ship by some kind of nerve cable. If I can sever it, it might disrupt their entire network." "Brooks, that's too dangerous," Morrison replied. "Get out of there." "Sir, with respect, saving people is what we do," Brooks said. "Tony, Mary, are you with me?" Her remaining soldiers, Tony Garcia and Mary Collins, nodded grimly. They had lost 3 team members fighting through the bioship, but they weren't giving up now. "Let's go save the galaxy," Garcia said. The 3 humans fought their way to the connection point between the bioship and the planet ship, the Nerve. Cable was massive, thick as a building, and pulsing with alien energy. Brooks planted every explosive charge they had around the cable. "This is Alpha Team," she reported. "Charges set. We're going to try to reach the escape pods." But even as she spoke, the bioship's defenses were closing in. Creatures that had once been aliens from a dozen different species crawled through the corridors toward them, their bodies twisted by the devourer absorption process. "Go," Brooks shouted to her soldiers. "I'll hold them off." "We're not leaving." "You, Sergeant," Garcia replied, raising his weapon. "That's an order." Brooks screamed, but her soldiers stayed. They formed a circle back to back, firing at the approaching monsters while the explosive countdown ticked toward 0. The explosion tore through the nerve cable and sent shockwaves through the entire Devourer network. The planet-killer weapon flickered and began to lose power as the connection was severed. "Brooks, Garcia, Collins." Morrison called through the radio, but there was no answer. The 3 soldiers had given their lives to save everyone else. The disruption in the Devourer network gave the human fleet the opening they needed. Captain Collins aboard the U's Ragnarok pushed his engines to maximum and rammed his ship directly into the planet-killer weapon. At the moment of impact, he manually detonated his fusion core. "This is for every species you murdered, you bastards," Collins shouted as his ship became a temporary star. The explosion was visible from 3 star systems away. The planet killer weapon was completely destroyed, and the massive planet ship began to break apart. But the victory came at a terrible cost. Half the human fleet was destroyed or heavily damaged. The remaining Devourer ships, cut off from their collective network, began to fall back. Without the central coordination of the planet ship, they were just individual vessels that could be defeated one at a time. Commander Kevin Roberts led his surviving Iron Wolf mechs in a final assault on the retreating bioships. "This is for Sergeant Brooks and her team," he said as his mech tore through enemy hulls. The battle lasted another 2 hours, but the outcome was no longer in doubt. The Devourers were defeated, their fleet destroyed or scattered. Kristalla Prime was safe, but at a cost that would be remembered forever. In the aftermath, Morrison stood on the bridge of his damaged ship and watched the Zilani rescue vessels searching for survivors. The crystal beings moved through space with grace and purpose, saving both human and Zilani lives without distinction. "Captain," Dr. Torres reported, "we're receiving a transmission from the largest bioship wreckage. It's not from the Devourers." They. Main screen flickered and showed something amazing. Faces appeared, the faces of aliens from the 12 consumed civilizations. They were free, no longer trapped in the Devourer collective. "We are the liberated," they spoke in unison. Their voices filled with joy and gratitude. The human concept of individual sacrifice has broken our chains. For the first time in decades, we can think our own thoughts. Morrison realized what had happened. When humans like Brooks and Collins chose to die for others, the concept had spread through the Devourer network like a virus. The collective consciousness couldn't understand or process the idea of willing self-sacrifice, and it had freed the absorbed minds. "We will rebuild our worlds," the liberated beings continued. "We will remember what humans did for us. The galaxy will know that when the Devourers came, humanity stood and said, 'No more.'" Prime Minister Kethvar appeared on another screen, his crystal body shining brighter than ever. "Captain Morrison, Admiral Cross, all humans, how can we thank you? You have saved not just the Zilani, but all free species in the galaxy." Admiral Cross, his uniform torn and his face showing the strain of command, replied simply, "Prime Minister, we did what anyone should do when their friends are in trouble." But Morrison knew the truth was more complex. Humans hadn't just saved the Zilani, they had revealed themselves to the galaxy as both protectors and destroyers. Other species would remember this battle and know that humans were not to be taken lightly. The journey home took 3 weeks. The surviving ships of the human fleet traveled slowly, carrying their wounded and their dead. In the cargo bay of the Harbinger, Morrison held a memorial service for Sergeant Brooks, Tony Garcia, Mary Collins, Captain Collins, and the thousands of other humans who had died in the battle. "They died so that strangers could live," Morrison said to the assembled crew. "They proved that humanity's greatest strength isn't our weapons or our tactics. It's our willingness to sacrifice for others." When the fleet reached Earth, they found the entire planet waiting for them. Every nation had declared a day of celebration and mourning. The heroes were honored, the dead were remembered, and humanity tried to understand what it meant to be. Known throughout the galaxy, Morrison was promoted to Admiral and given command of Earth's new interstellar defense force. The Zilani had shared their crystal technology, and human ships were now faster and more powerful than ever before. But Morrison knew that technology wasn't what had won the battle. Dr. Torres was put in charge of a new research program to study the liberated alien species and help them rebuild their civilizations. She often worked with former Devourer victims who were learning to be individuals again after decades in the collective. Commander Roberts became the leader of Earth's mech forces, training new pilots to fight in the strange environments of alien worlds. His Iron Wolves were now legendary throughout human space. Dr. Sam Mitchell, the combat medic who had survived the battle, established hospitals on Crystalla Prime and other liberated worlds. He taught alien doctors human medical techniques while learning alien healing methods in return. But for Morrison, the most important change was in humanity itself. The species that had once looked up at the stars and wondered if they were alone now knew they were part of a larger community. Humans were no longer just explorers or colonists. They were protectors of the weak and enemies of oppression. 6 months after the battle, Morrison received a message from the far edge of the galaxy. It was from a species called the Corvin, who were facing their own extinction at the hands of a different enemy. "We have heard the stories of what humans did at Crystalla Prime," the message said. "We know you are the species that stands between the darkness and the light. Please, we need your help." Morrison looked at the message and smiled. Humanity had found its purpose among the stars. They were the monsters that other monsters feared, the species that said no when evil tried to spread. He activated the